Guys, I'm Jim and this is Jim's Fix-It Shop, and right now we're going to crack open this chain case and see what it looks like inside. I doubt we're going to have any problems. This machine is way too new and in good a shape to have too much wrong with it. But boss wanted to go through it, and he's letting me use it as a display to make these videos with, and I appreciate that a lot. I just washed it off in some paint thinner in my parts washer, and it's still dripping a little. So let's get on with it and tear it apart. I'm going to have to tip this camera down. Hang on. Okay, this is the big nut that holds the clutch assembly on. I had one viewer tell me that no matter what I do, I can't get this Woodruff key out of the shaft. Well, I've got a very high-tech way of doing that. You get yourself a standard pair of side cutters for cutting wire. Grab onto the key, put the jaws of the pliers flat on the shaft and grab the key. And just push down. And it usually pops right out. Very simple when you know a trick. Take this cone-shaped washer off. Throw that in the bucket. Now we're going to take off this brake assembly. And it has a spring on it, so take note how the spring is hooked on so you can get it back on there right. Myself, I don't have any trouble putting these things back together because I got all the videos to watch. There's not a whole lot to them. They're pretty simple to work on. The spring hooks in the crack of the case. For the other side, you have a piece of pipe on here that it pivots on, so you can't over tighten it. You tighten it up on this little piece of tubing and it can still pivot. Pop the spring out of there, put that back on that piece of tubing, slide the bolt and put the nut back on. That way we don't lose anything. Now we have to take out these 250 screws they have around the perimeter of this case. And I'm sure you don't want to sit there and watch me do that, so we're going to put it on pause. Okay, we got all them screws out, and we're going to pop this thing open and see what it looks like. You're probably going to have to put a screwdriver in here in this crack and pry it. You don't want to pry all in one place too hard. You don't want to bend this. If you bend one of these covers, it won't reseal and you'll have trouble with it leaking. So I just kind of work my way around it. And you can hear it popping loose. And that should come off. Well, that's kind of discouraging. Looks like they forgot to fill this one. There's nothing in it. I mean, there's some in it, but when this thing is standing up, you're supposed to fill it to here. That don't look very full to me. And it is, well, it's not solid like grease. It hasn't totally solidified, but there's not anything in there to get spread around to do any lubrication. I'm really surprised. There's a lot of mineral spirits that got in when I was washing it. You can see that puddled up in the tray. But as far as this wonderful snapper lube, I don't see any. I don't know what to say about that. I guess I'm glad I took it apart. We're going to take the chain off and see what that looks like. I've got a loose roller here from one of the bearings. Apparently the bearings are falling apart. There it is right there. Goes right in that hole. Get that back in there, it might be okay. It definitely needs to be cleaned out. Let's see what the chain looks like. Very little movement at all. At this point, I certainly wouldn't be worried about that chain. So we will clean this thing all up. I wonder if they has them little bird mouth holes that one of my viewers were talking about. That once in a while at the factory, these were supposed to be hammered shut so it wouldn't leak. It does have it. You can see the impression right there. It looks kind of like a little bird's mouth. And excuse me. I can't see any light coming through it, but I think I may weld that shut just to be safe. There is not one on this half, it's just on that half. So we're going to take these parts out. We're going to clean this all up good and set it aside and rebuild it when we start putting this all back together. Okay, that's it. Now, I'm a little disappointed in this special snapper lube. As close as Tim can come up with a date on this thing, he figures it's anywhere from 7 to 10 years old. And already you can see, now when I washed this in a parts machine, I pretty much soaked this thing. When I cracked it open, a bunch of mineral spirits came out of the inside. What you would have thought, once the mineral spirits got in with this grease, it would have loosened it a little bit. But as you can see, there is no movement at all with this snapper lube. It's just stuck there. So now if the differential's the same way, I cleaned this spot down here. You don't see anything moving down there. If the differential's the same way, you've got chains in there. You've got a gear reduction from the chain that comes off of the, well, let me show you. It'll be a whole lot easier than trying to explain it to you. We'll come over here on the model. That's what this is for. Now inside the chain case, we just opened that. If you've never seen inside of a differential, this is a cutaway working model. I can turn this thing on and you can watch it run. Off your hex shaft, these are all what they call jack shafts. Every step it goes through, it slows down the speed of the engine. Your engine is running about 3,000 RPMs. Well, obviously you don't want your tires going that fast unless you're going to race this thing. So as it goes through all these steps, these are gear reductions to slow it down. you've seen inside of here. Once the clutch disc is turning this hex shaft gets turned by the clutch disc. Put this thing in neutral. Then you got another chain reduction here and a sprocket that turns a gear. And then it turns this 63 tooth gear. And then it goes through the little bull gears that make the differential work. You can turn these in different directions or the same direction. So you got all this stuff in there spinning. You want to pick up some oil or grease or something and spread it through the case. All your oil is going to be down in this portion when it's laying on its tires. You want to get some oil up here in this bushing to lubricate it. This bushing over here has a grease fitting. You want to grease this. I grease mine every month or two. Pump some grease in there. If your boots are ripped, these are extremely important to keep in good shape. If these get ripped, dirt gets in here, can work its way inside the chain case, and it can get inside of your differential. There's a big crack in there. Dirt can go in there very easily. If you over grease this bushing, all it's going to do is squirt out over here and help lubricate this shaft so it shifts better. You want to keep this greased. So having that snapper lube in there and having it hardened up the way it is, when this thing is spinning, it should be picking up some type of lubricant. This gear should pick it up, and it should wrap it around the gear, and it runs down in these bull gears. It runs down on the bushing, on the axle, and that's what lubricates this thing. Without that lubrication, this whole thing is going to wear out. So I'm going to run in the other room and clean this mess up. And I'll show you what I end up finding once I get it cleaned up when I tear the differential apart. This bearing is a little worrisome to me. I don't like the way that the needles are falling out. I mean, I just rotate it and they're coming out of there. It tells me the retainer is worn out. That's supposed to keep the needles in the right position. This one does not look like that. You can spin this one and none of the needles are moving. I'll probably end up putting a new bearing on that side. So that was our big surprise. Yeah, no surprise to me. Now, like I said, we're trying to figure out how old this is. He figures at most it's 10 years old. And you can see there's still no movement down here with this lubricant running like it should. I just had my blazer worked on. It's been making a lot of weird noises in the rear end. I had my mechanic. I don't work on cars anymore. I don't have time. I found this guy that's retired. He's been doing it forever. He used to work at Ford Garage. And he does all this out of his house, and he does excellent work. Yeah, I wouldn't work as cheap as he does. He had to tear the rear end apart on my Blazer. I put a new bearing and axle in it. And I said, when you do, I want the gear lube that you drain out of it. I know it's 16 years old. It's a 2001. This is it. This is 16-year-old gear lube. Now, what do you think is going to lubricate this differential and chain case better? This stuff or that double-aught snapper lube? The choice is yours. I'm not going to tell you what to use. I know what I'm putting in mine when I get it put together. So I'll go clean this up and we'll talk to you soon. Maybe tomorrow I'll tear that differential apart. But until then, I want to thank you guys that have been sending me all this information. I really appreciate it. I have broke over the 1,000 subscriber mark. I've had some viewers say, hey, you ought to get some shirts. Maybe I'll get some Jim's Fix-It shirts with some kind of logo on the back about a snapper. Give me some ideas. And we'll give some away. Who knows? Maybe I can hit 2,000 and we'll give a hat and a shirt away. So until next time, work safe, have fun, and put your snapper back together. Talk to you soon.